My name is Jonah, and for the last 14 months I was the eyes and the quiet hand for a ragged column of survivors. I had a position. I had a routine. I had a friend. Mac was there before the infection hit this sector, and he stayed after because he believed in duty like some men believe in God. He carried a toolkit, a laugh and a telescope of an imagination that made broken things sound fixable. He fixed flat tires, busted pumps, and the little human things that made a group feel less like prey and more like a family. When the world went hard and loud, he stayed soft where it counted. Everyone else carried guns or grudges. Mac carried duct tape and a small battered paperback collection of poems he claimed kept him sane. He'd read us one stanza and then laugh like we'd all just been let in on a secret. He could break you down in 5 minutes and build you back up again in 10. I'm telling you this now, because the moment I still wake up to the clip that replays like a bad radio signal has nothing to do with tactics. It has to do with a face and a breath and the simple fact that even a perfect shot can be a lie when the target isn't what your eyes told you to kill. We'd taken the rooftop as an overwatch for the convoy moving through the lowlands that morning. My position was chosen for sightlines. 2 old TV antennas, a collapsed water tower, and a crooked billboard where pigeons no longer nested. We watched the road because that's where the hungry things scavenge and where desperate humans sometimes forgot to look left before stepping off a curb. The convoy's engines sounded like a distant weather front. Our radios carried bursts of static, and Faye's voice, the convoy leader, with that tired cheer she used to keep people going. Mac came up to my post at first light the way he always did, with a mug of coffee he'd stolen from the convoy's fuel can and a grin that said mischief before anything else. He asked for a look through the scope. I let him. He squinted, found the convoy's lead vehicle, and tilted back like a man surveying a chessboard. We traded silence. That's how we worked. You talk too loud with a scope because the world listens for sound. Nice morning for sniping, eh? He joked, breath clouding in the cold. You always find a way to make it sound decent, I said. Outside the dome of my world, the steel, the glass, the scope, cities collapsed into backgrounds of smoke and ruin. Inside it, for a few minutes, it felt like just me and Mac. 2 idiots with guns and stubbornness, keeping other people alive for reasons we couldn't name aloud. If you're hearing this, know that everything I say now is honest. I trained my hands on this rifle to keep us alive. I loved the man whose silhouette drifted down a corridor like a memory. I killed him, and the rest of this confession is the part that happens after you pull the trigger. Everything that comes apart when a life is suddenly something you can feel in the bottom of your stomach. There's a cadence to survival that becomes a religion. Watch, warn, kill, move. It's not glamorous. There are no medals waiting at the end of the road. The discipline is surgical. We agreed, early on, to a handful of rules that kept more of us alive than bad luck or bullets ever did. Rule 1, you don't shoot civilians. Rule 2, you don't shoot surrendered people. Rule 3, if you're the Overwatch, you take the shot only when the trigger gives you the map for the rest of the mission. Those rules were our armor. We repeated them by firelight, like prayers, so that when the world went strange, we still knew how to be human. As a sniper, I existed at the outermost limit of those rules. My work was the quiet calculus that allowed the convoy to pass. I would spot a threat, a pack of infected converging on a choke point, a band of looters setting up an ambush, a single insane shooter, and I would end it with one hole through the world. There is an economy to a good shot. Minimum noise, maximum effect. Suppressors became extensions of the code because silence protects more than my position. It protects the living behind me. We had an optic for every weather condition and a mental map of where the hunters liked to set up. We knew which buildings had weak stairwells and which overpasses had rust so old it bled. We learned to sense when the city itself was lying to us. You get a sixth sense. You can tell when a crowd is wrong because its rhythm changes. Footsteps lose tempo. Breathing gets too loud. In those moments, your hand goes to the rifle before your brain understands why. Mac was not a sniper. He was a mechanic. a jack of all trades who could jury-rig a starter motor from nothing and turn a broken generator into a humming heart. But that morning, he was on overwatch with me because Faye had asked him to watch for an intersection we knew was narrow and exposed. She trusted him. I trusted him. Everyone did. It is one thing to take an enemy you do not know and place a round in the space between their life and your safety. It is another thing entirely to place that same round into the silhouette of someone who has laughed at your stupid jokes and repaired your boots. We are supposed to be able to do the former. The latter is the misfire of a moral universe. You learn rules to stay human, but sometimes the world asks you to break them because the sheet of paper that says "civilians first" does not come with instructions on what happens when the battlefield itself lies. We were 2 hours out from the river crossing when the first mistake happened. Not an error of aim, but of information. Faye's voice on the radio said "clear" over and over, a steadying mantra, but the satellite patch we had on the map was 2 minutes out of phase. The convoy moved like a heartbeat on the wrong clock. Somewhere, a recon element had misread a figure in the distance, a person or a hunched infected, and called it neutral. We accepted it because we all accept small lies to get through a big day. I had my scope set on the intersection where our exit lane collapsed into a single-lane bridge. Through the glass, movement looked like movement, limbs, silhouettes, the shimmer of a jacket caught in wind. We'd had reports of a lone scout monitoring traffic at that crossing. A landscaper's gait could look like a rifleman's in the wrong light. A backpack flapping could be camouflage. You learn to separate intentions from motion through habit. The way someone carries weight, the speed of their steps, the angle their head tilts. It's how you tell a threat from someone trying to get home. Mac was watching me for the signal I give when I open fire, a small, minimal movement we developed to prevent misfires. In training, we practiced those gestures until they were muscle memory. He was also checking the far lane with the binoculars he'd borrowed. We traded quick glances. I saw him lift a hand to indicate the far side, yes, that lane clear, and then lower it to his chin as if adjusting an invisible collar. His breath fogged the glass. We had no firm intel that civilians were crossing in that area, but we had reports of small groups moving at dawn, and in this world, you always prepare for the worst and hope the best. The convoy's hum became louder, the engines roaring like a congregation singing louder as they near the altar. Then someone on the radio, call sign Scout 2, cracked the line with a voice that went raw with urgency. Movement at the overpass. Unknown approaching fast with a... And the sentence clipped off into static. No one else had on-the-ground visual. Faye ordered speed, which in our world means 1,000 tiny calculations. If the convoy goes faster, it reduces exposure time but increases risk at choke points. I had 30 seconds to decide. 30 seconds in a sniper's time is an eternity. It is enough to wait, to get more data, to aim for a safer shot. It is also enough to lose your convoy to an ambush. From my rooftop, the world compresses into the lens. I watched the figure approach the overpass. One person, jogging, a backpack, arms pumping. The motion matched everything my training told me to hold for. But what my training did not tell me was how love and history warp sight. I hesitated for one breath as I recognized the gait, the lean, the left foot drag, the way the walker rotated their torso, and for a heartbeat the world folded into a single impossible thought. Could that be Mac? No, I told myself. Impossible. Mac would not be down there alone. He'd be with the convoy. He wouldn't risk the open road. Still, the silhouette had the same slump. The jacket flapped in the wrong way. My training and the reconnaissance report told me to act. My body, conditioned by months of killing to protect others, obeyed. I squeezed. Sound is a liar. A suppressed round tells the world a story it does not want to tell. To those under it, the sound is a whisper. To those near it, it is a thunderclap. In my ears, it was the click and the small, almost polite twang of the bolt cycling. The recoil was a polite suggestion to my shoulder, an old friend I did not look at. The bullet left the barrel, and the world rearranged. Through the scope, it happened with terrible, calm clarity. The figure staggered, a hand going to the chest, a backward pitch to the shoulders, then collapsing into the gutter where Dawn pooled with motor oil. Time did not slow so much as condense. Every second felt like a bead slipping through a string. I watched as the body crumpled and the man, because it was very clearly a man now, rolled once and then lay with his face turned away. There was the flash of a bandana I recognized, the dull of a boot I'd seen 100 times. The world shrank to oxygen and the metallic tick of the scope's reticle warming under my thumb. The radio erupted like a hornet's nest. Faye's voice exploded over the crackle with orders and panic. On the street, people screamed. Some in terror, some in the raw animal sound grief makes, and the convoy screeched to an unholy stop. In the immediate seconds after the shot, I felt nothing except a cold realization that shaped itself into physical nausea. The figure had hair at the temple the exact shade of Max, and on the shoulder, a small tear patched with duct tape. I tore my head from the scope like someone waking from a sleep in which they had been stabbed. I swung down from the rooftop in a handful of practiced movements I no longer trusted. My legs moved on autopilot, my boots finding the same cracked stair I'd used 1,000 times. Below the rooftop, the city smelled like scorched rubber and panic. By the time I had gained the street, 5 people were on their knees, hands scraping for a pulse that trembled like a last insect. I saw his face and then did not look away. Mac's eyes were open and looking at me. For a heartbeat they were accusatory and then sad and then far away. He mouthed something as if forming a name, as if asking why the sky had turned on him. I dropped to my knees and put my hand where his body said the wound was. There was a wet warmth, but nothing to do. The world narrowed into a machine of CPR and futility. The medics arrived. They had the same haunted, efficient faces that soldiers learn to wear when the unfixable walks through the door. They moved like people carrying a weight too familiar to be surprised by it. No breath. No pulse, one said in a voice that was all the verdict anyone needed. Behind me, someone screamed, and that scream folded into the city noise, which was now a collage of engines, barking dogs, and the thin sound of someone, maybe Faye, crying like a small child. I wanted to apologize to Mac like you apologize for a spilled glass. I wanted to scream that I had made a mistake, that I had misread the motion through the scope. My mouth found no words that could rearrange reality. They told me later what I already knew. There was a small scrap of paper in his pocket, folded so many times the creases could hold a life's worth of secrets. It had a clown sticker on the corner, an old joke they shared. Beneath it, in shaky handwriting, a short note. Go slow. I thought of the ways we used to say, go slow, as a joke about life and the terrible command it had become. You don't stop being a sniper because you hit the wrong target. You stop being human in the exact way that feels like failure. The rifle is still in your hands. The rules you lived by are now hollow songs. The shot hangs in the air like a curse. After the shot, the world attempts to narrate itself. There were reports to write, statements to make. Faye asked me questions with a steadiness I have only ever seen in people with no private life left. Where I was positioned, the angle of fire, what I saw through the scope. I told the truth. There's nothing to gain by lying when every person you love can read your face like an open dossier. The convoy commander. Hark wanted accountability, and we gave him transcripts, coordinates, the exact clock times. The recon team swore they had called a hostile, and their voices on the recording sounded like children suddenly thrust into policy. We listened to the playback. Static chewed up words until the sentence was a ghost. Some called this tragic fog of war, others called it negligence. Within the group, people needed a reason to keep going. Some found it in procedure, after-action checks, roll calls, and the grinding logic of survival. Others found it in far less healthy places, rage, the economy of blame. If you can pin error on a human cause, you can sleep at night. If the world is chaotic and random, then nothing is anyone's fault. The formal inquiry said I acted within the rules given the intel. They said the silhouette matched an enemy profile, that the figure had failed to identify, and that under the circumstances the shot was legally justifiable. Those words are a shape around what happened, but they do not fit inside my chest. Legality is not the same as morality. Law is thin paper compared to the weight of a friend's face. People look at you differently after something like this. Some called me brave in the coldest sense, that I had been steady when it mattered. Some called me a murderer. A few did not bother with words. They simply stopped speaking my name. Silence is a delicate, religionless shunning that carries more meaning than curses. At night, I wake to the small, stupid things, the way Mac used to fold his jacket, the chipped tooth on his coffee mug, the poem he loved about gulls and winter. The routine of grief is less about pain and more about learning to carry absence. You go on patrols with a hole that smells like copper and cold breath. You joke with other men until the joke curdles and you realize you're sustained by denial. People offered explanations. Lazard from Recon told me he hadn't paused on his call because he'd seen movement further down the road and panicked. Faye clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You did your job." Her face was a closed book. "We all make mistakes," she said once in a voice that meant something other than comfort. Comfort had become a currency we could not afford. The hardest thing was that I knew she was right in the narrow sense. I did my job. I am trained to remove threats. But no training tells you what to do with the weight afterwards. That is something everyone expects you to carry in silence until it crushes you. There are ways to try and pay a debt that cannot be repaid. Some men take to prayer, some to whiskey. I took to work that felt like reparation. I began to double-check exit lanes, to personally escort the most vulnerable across choke points, to position myself where I could see both sides of a gray line and take the extra heartbeat to verify a silhouette. If I could not bring Mac back, perhaps I could prevent another mistake from happening. When we stopped at a broken schoolhouse to shelter the night, a boy the age Mac would be if he were younger keyed in on me. He had a gap-toothed grin, and the way he watched the rifle in my hands was like a small accusation. He asked to see the scope. I let him. For 5 minutes he peered through the same lens that had taken my friend's life and giggled at the sight of a pigeon I'd managed not to kill. It was a small human thing in a weathered world, and in those minutes I tasted relief so sharp it hurt. I sought Mac's mother because guilt grows teeth when left to fester. She was under the same tarp with a group of other survivors and held a small box with the same clown sticker I'd found. She didn't shout. She only looked at me like a judge that had seen both sides and reached a verdict beyond words. "He wanted to do good," she said. She touched my sleeve lightly, more like a test. "You did what you thought you had to." Those words landed like thin, inadequate blankets on cold proof. Forgiveness, we discovered, is not a thing you can summon. It is a slow, irregular process that some people are willing to offer and others withhold until the world grows soft or hard enough to admit it. Mac's mother forgave me in moments and withheld in others. She would talk about the poems sometimes, and then be still when the sound of axes in the distance made us all watch the horizon. I began writing him notes. Short things, all stupid and alive, pinning them to places I knew he'd laugh if he could. I wrote a bad limerick on a water bottle and left it where he might find it. It was childish and messy, and maybe that was the point. Penitence can be awkward and human, and sometimes you have to be ridiculous in order to be sincere. On bad days, I sat alone with the rifle and spoke to him like a man trying to reason with fate. It sounds foolish when I say it, but the voice in my head is insistent and small, and sometimes it answers back. "Maybe you saved more people than you lost," it says. Maybe not. The truth is both simpler and crueler. I did what I was trained to do, and I must live with what it cost. Some of my comrades started calling me the resigner because I moved slower now, as if my hands now carried an extra ballast of doubt. My steady aim had become less a gift and more a burden. If the world needed a monster, they wouldn't pick me. If it needed a man who could feel and still act, occasionally they did. I still keep the rifle clean. I still check the scope. Rituals are skyhooks. They keep you from drifting into the black when there are no shores left. This video isn't an attempt to absolve myself or to indict a system of survivors doing their best under impossible conditions. It is a document of a life I shattered, and the strange calculus we keep in our heads when we translate humanity into gunfire. If there is a lesson in this, and I believe there is, It is simple and brutal. Precision does not equal truth. You can be perfect at the mechanics of a thing and still be awful at the consequences. We can train and steady and become excellent at the act of stopping danger, and still be reduced to asking whether the person who died was the danger we meant to stop. So I tell the story not to be forgiven, but to be understood. To the men and women who watch this and who carry rifles and radios in the terrible business of dividing life from death, take one more heartbeat. Ask one more time. If you can spare it, wait for the next second of information. The world is giving you things, silence and motion and shape, and you only get to translate those signals once. If you're lucky, you get to choose differently next time. If you're watching as a civilian, know this. The people tasked with keeping you safe are not automatons. We are fragile tools in a broken machine. We make mistakes because the map is wrong, because the light lies, because the heart does not always follow the rules. Forgive if you can. Demand better if you must. Mac's poems are back in my pack. Sometimes I read them out loud to people who will listen. They are small and absurd and alive, like him. I keep them because memory is the only place we can meet him now. I've started teaching a younger man to use the rifle. Not to kill better, but to see more. I tell him the same thing I tell myself on mornings when the wind smells like rust and old coffee. Go slow. If you want more of this, if you want me to break down the scene-by-scene technicalities, the angle calculations, the recon mistakes, the ways you can build safety protocols into convoys, say so in the comments. Tell me what part you want expanded. I can go into the tactical readouts, the morning transmissions, the exact radio logs. I can also make more of these, because telling this story out loud is how I keep the memory of a friend from growing cold. I'm Jonah. I'm a sniper in the apocalypse. I took the shot. I keep him with me by telling you, because silence makes guilt into a thing that eats the heart. If you like this story, take a moment to subscribe. Leave a comment. For Mac, or for anyone else lost in the flood, light a candle if that's how you mourn. Do something small to say the name of someone who shouldn't be only a memory. Go slow.